Okay, are we ready to go? I see a bunch of questions in here, and which we will get to shortly. If you've got a HP pencil, works just fine. Okay, welcome everybody. I'm glad to see you here in my studio and to welcome you for another drawing class. My name is Michael Markowsky and I'm going to be showing you how to draw mouths today. And maybe more specifically lips, since we're not going to go into the full structure of the chin and jaw and tongue and teeth and all that kind of stuff. This is episode number 20 of a basic drawing class where we're starting off from ground zero and teaching everybody the basics of drawing. So we've learned how to do all sorts of things, including all the way at the back at the beginning, learning how to shade and do a value scale. So kind of going from dark to light with either the tip of the pencil or the side of the pencil. And those are going to be useful techniques that we're going to use today. One of the questions I saw in the comments is what kind of pencil we're going to be using. You can just use a pencil that you found on the sidewalk. If you want to use, my recommendation is to use a 2B pencil. That's my preferred type of pencil, and you can usually find that by looking on the side of your pencil. 99.5% of all pencils that have ever been made on Earth are HB pencils. And as we go from 2B, 3B, 4B, all the way up to the 9B here, they just get darker and darker and softer lead. So you can use all of those. I may even break out, I've got some willow charcoal sticks, which we've used in the past. And charcoal or Conte are different types of drawing materials that you can then smudge and get your fingers really dirty. You can also do that with a regular pencil as well, but these are really specifically intended to do that. When you pick one of these charcoal sticks up, you know, your fingers are guaranteed to get dirty, right? Which drives some people crazy, I know that. So, what we're going to start out by doing is we're going to learn how to draw just a very simple face, or lips, sorry. And then I'm going to show you the basic structure of the lips, of a more realistic face. And then we're going to have some time at the end to draw kind of maybe one more realistic version of a pair of lips, which I have a photograph of my lips, but you could use a photograph of your lips or anybody else's lips if you like. But I encourage you, if you have a mirror that you could use for this exercise, that would be really helpful. Just because it's also good to, you know, sometimes I have people in class, especially before I ask people to bring mirrors, who'd be like, yeah, I don't know if that's, you can just see the skepticism in their, the wheels cranking in their mind. And if you hold a lip up, or you hold a mirror up, and you look at your lips, or any other facial feature for that matter, you don't have to take my word for it. You can see it in your own face in the mirror to use as reference. Okay, so I've got our sketchbook. You can use any pencils. I like to use a little bit of color, not because I have any bias towards just your plain old pencil, but because it makes it a little bit easier for people to see what I'm doing step by step. So when I start building up different layers, I use a different color. So let's get right to it. Maybe before I jump to, I'm going to switch to this. To the first drawing, I think, why don't I just kind of quickly show you what I have in mind here. So what I want to talk about as our kind of our first warm-up drawing, just to kind of get the creative juices flowing, is this very famous logo created for the Rolling Stones, the band the Rolling Stones, in 1971 or 72 or something around there. by this fellow here, John, I don't know how you'd say this name, Pasci or Pasha? John Pasha, I think he was a student at the Royal College of Art in London, England at the time, and the band contacted him, asked him to make a design. And for their album, I think it's Sticky Fingers. It's a very famous one that has, when it was originally printed, had a zipper, like it was a photo of a man's crotch wearing a pair of jeans, and Andy Warhol designed the front cover album art, and there was actually a zipper built in there that you could zip up and down. And funnily enough, they had to ship the, I don't know, is there an album? There's not a photograph of the actual album, but funnily enough, they had to ship the records with the fly zipped down, which was the center of the record, because if it was zipped up, it was actually, damaging the record. So just, anyway, Andy Warhol is often seen as the inventor of this logo, which I did a quick little, so this is the original design. It was subsequently changed to this one by somebody else, but if you can notice the difference, besides the color, you can let me know what you think. But I guess there's no images of the record, but so we're gonna learn how to draw this illustration, because I want you to see that there are many, many ways of drawing a mouth that aren't quote-unquote realistic and yet look good. And in fact, well, this is the site I was looking for. This Rolling Stones logo is the most iconic design of all time. Not just, rock and roll design or logo design, but according to this website, the Independent newspaper in England, it's the most iconic of all human time. And they had a list here. Look at these. This is where they ranked this in here as higher than the Che Guevara image, the Hard Rock Cafe, Superman logo, Mickey Mouse, Coca-Cola, Batman, Pink Floyd, the smiley face, the yellow emoji smiley face, like Star Wars, Ghostbusters, like NASA logo, Pepsi logo. So I didn't realize, apparently this is such an iconic image, but anyway, that's what we're going to do today. So let's bring this up here. Enough chatting and let's get to work. So here is the most famous design of all time, apparently. And, I haven't practiced this at all ahead of time. This is something, I thought to myself, what would be an appropriate warm-up drawing for some lips? Well, I guess I was thinking about this because it's the most iconic of all time. So how would I begin this? Just looking at it kind of raw like this. Well, I'm gonna look for the basic shapes in this image, right? So let's do this. Let's go right to this overhead view here. And so to begin with, what I'm gonna look for is the basic shape. Well, you know what, even before I do that, before I even get the basic shapes, I'm just going to divide my page into quarters. And I'm using my pink pencil here to symbolize a very, very lightly drawn line, like maybe a line that is almost invisible to most people. Something you could erase very easily. So, and how about, can I scroll this down? I can't. So how about I'm gonna move my sketch pad up just a little bit, just so I'm gonna try to get the corners of the lips right in there. And if I look down, that's gonna mean that, so I'm just thinking to myself, okay, this is how much room I want to allocate to my drawing, right? So I'm just kind of organizing the page. That's my anticipated space. I'd love to have a little border around the edges, right? So now the next thing is how can I make this all fit? Okay, so let's imagine almost it looks like the middle point of the top of the lips is going to be around here. And then let's say that tongue is going to be down here. So just for our sake, I'm going to just make a big circle for this tongue. All right, so that is kind of easier for us to see. All right, and I'm even just going to, let's say I'm going to draw a line right to the center from here. So again, I'm going to draw this a little bit darker for people to see at home, so you can see what I'm up to, because I don't want it to be too dark. Okay, and then let's just imagine that this line also connects to this corner. It may or may not, but just, I always find it helpful to put a few lines down and then see how things look. So then if this is this end, I'm gonna, let's curve these off on the sides. Okay, and then let's say if we've decided this is going to be the center, which actually, you know, let's just kind of do a little sketching in here. So we draw this, and this is kind of the mirror image, speaking of mirrors. All right, and then this kind of disappears in here, and then this kind of comes down in and around here. So, and you know, I'm just also going to draw it underneath here, even though I can't see it. And that's helpful because already I can see the difference between, this makes more sense than the way I originally drew it. Does that make sense? So I'm using these underdrawing guidelines to help get my placement. All right, and once I start kind of feeling a little bit more confident, I'm just going to go over things a little bit. And let's say this tongue does recede towards the center. Now let's do the inside of the mouth. Okay, and then let's say our goal is we want to get this inside part of the lips here. All right, okay, so that would mean actually that tongue should probably end in around here. All right, okay. It's always these little bits of kind of checking and correcting, right? And there's very few people who can just, you know, crank out a drawing without making any types of mistakes or having to do any kind of thinking like what we're doing right now. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying to find where these teeth are. And they're pretty close to this line. Maybe I've drawn them a little bit low. So I'm going to move that back up. Here. So how does this look? All right, okay, I look at that, and then I'm looking at my tongue and thinking, whoa, okay. Well, the way I've drawn it, this tongue is kind of going to disappear over here, but it looks like it's supposed to connect over here into this tooth here. So that means I got to do this. But when I put my pencil here to look at that angle, it looks like it was actually closer to this angle that I originally drew before. So what's wrong here? Well, what is wrong with my drawing is that this tongue is maybe a little bit too long, the way that I've drawn it, right? So technically, I mean, I can use this drawing as it is right now. No problem whatsoever. But if the goal is to make it like the original, then I'm going to make a few little changes. And I'm going to do that right now. If you've followed along and you're right here, then it wouldn't be too hard to, let's say we find this. this would be that black line, right? And this white line here. You know, once you've got kind of basics in, you can kind of do all this. But I am gonna, so, and then this, if this is your, this would be your black line, the other black line. So I could do, I am gonna make some changes just because I want people to see that an artist, even like myself, doesn't get it right off the top every time. And I know for some people that might feel like, oh, he's making it seem like so much more difficult. If he can't do it right, then what hope do I have? But I want you to see that things, you know, it's a process, and that it's okay to make mistakes, right? So I'm just moving things down because this top I felt was a little high, and this tongue's gonna go up. So, and I'm gonna go over top of this with my darker pencil in a second, so you can see all this. But I just want, so I know it could be a little bit confusing for some people, but just wanted to demonstrate that. So, okay, so now I'm gonna go over top of my lines. So here's the inside lip, here's these teeth. And then here's this tongue. Okay, now I could, if I want to be careful to, this tongue doesn't go right through, right? It connects with the red up here. So just before I start going too wild, I want to make sure that I'm gonna leave some space. Okay. So I'd be curious to see how everybody else did when they finished this drawing. So likewise, this bottom lip is coming up. And maybe, you know, I should have drawn this with red instead of blue, but, well, whatever, right? I can always color it red inside, or I could use this as the sketch for another drawing. So if this is this tongue comes up. Oh, I just noticed that line shouldn't be there at all. And then this one. Okay. So, and then here's these reflections on the top. Okay, and I'm just going to color a little bit of this darker area in here. Okay. Again, this is just our warm-up drawing as we get started here, so if it didn't turn out perfect, that's all right. Just the attempt to do this is more than 90% of humans will ever do. Most people don't have the courage that you do to sit down with a piece of paper and try to figure something like this out. All right? I'm sure you know plenty of people. I'm sure if you told people right now, as you may already have done, like, oh, I'm taking this drawing class from this guy on the internet, and I don't know if I'm doing any good, you'll hear your friends go like, wow, that's brave. I could never do that. Like, I just can't draw. I don't have a creative bone in my body. I'm just, It's just not something I'm capable of doing. You're like, really? You don't think you're capable of drawing or learning how to draw? Anyway, okay, so this here, if I wanted to color it in red or purple or green or whatever color, because they have colored it in all sorts of colors, you could certainly do that. Again, this little line, you know, I really try to erase it, but it's such a minor part of the, you know, that it's not a problem. So now that I've done this once, if I wanted to, I could do it on another page, probably much faster, probably without having to do some of these guidelines, and to save myself some time, right? So that's another part of the drawing process, is trying it once, learning your lessons, and reapplying those lessons to the next drawing. I mean, look, this center line and the tongue, I certainly overdid that. You know, these could probably be a little bit bigger, and in fact, maybe the tops of these lips could have actually been higher. Maybe I went too far on my edit. Right? And so just, again, as I'm talking about this, don't feel discouraged if it didn't turn out exactly the way you wanted the first time around, right? I know that this might be the only time during the week where you have an opportunity to make drawings, so you feel really precious about it, and you've got to, like, you know, if I don't make a great drawing during these couple hours or hour that I've devoted, you know, to make an artwork, then I've just wasted my time. Like, what was the whole purpose of that? Now I just feel even worse. But again, like I was talking about yesterday, you know, this is a lifelong journey, and whether you know it or not, you've already, just over the past like half hour here, come, you know, quite far down the block, you know, or, you know, a couple of miles down that pathway than you may even realize. Because now, even though you didn't do it perfectly, you've at least attempted it, and you've internalized all those lessons. Okay. Palash says, Pashai? Pashay? I don't know how to pronounce, I still don't know how to pronounce that. Amy says, sanitize your pencil if you found it on the sidewalk. Okay. So we're gonna move on to drawing the structure of the lips now. So let's, where's my sketchbook here? So I'm gonna go to another page, and we're going to learn the basics of how to draw a so-called regular face here. And yeah, I'm just gonna show you the basics, and then we're gonna try drawing one from life. So I'm just gonna show you one without even looking at an image, just the knowledge that I've learned here. So let's say, you know, you've got this drawing of a human face, and you've already done that, and you've been left with like a little line here as a placeholder, right? So let's say that this is the length of these lips that you want to fit your mouth on, and this would be, let's say this is your guideline. So how about, I'm just going to draw this kind of, so let's say this is the bottom of half of somebody's, and there's actually your nose, this chin would be, anyway, get into all the whole, so so what I want to do, if this is the middle point of what I'm just going to make like a little V shape here, right? And that V shape is the top lip, the shape of the top lip as it comes a little bit down between. So this is the top lip, and this is going to be the bottom lip here. So this is kind of the line, the gap between our lips that goes into the mouth, right? So we've got this shape, and then I'm going to draw a line above, and I'm going to exaggerate this a little bit just so we can see this, okay? And then I'm gonna kind of on either side, like another semicircle out. All right, and then often they kind of go down just a little bit at the ends. Okay, so we've got, maybe when we do the other version, we're gonna de-emphasize this kind of wild enlargement that I've just done here. So I find if we're starting this way and we kind of come up with this line in the middle, that is already a very big help. Now, I'm going to use a different color to... Okay, so when we think of the lips, we have a few different... Underneath here, we have sort of like two pockets of, I don't know, fat or whatever you want to. All right, so this is the bottom lip under here. And similarly on the top lip, we've got these, they're kind of the same, they look a little bit funny with the way that I've drawn it. And then we've got this U shape here. All right, and then it kind of comes up like that. So the way that we would draw over top of this is we kind of go up and down and up and down. So that's your top lip. We'll do this again to make sure that everyone understands it here. And then we're going to come down here, and it tends to kind of come up and down and back. All right, so, oops. So we've got this line in between the lips. And then we've got the line above the lips. Or the top lip and the bottom lip. Now everybody has different shaped lips, or very, I mean, some people have thinner lips, some people have wider lips, some people have a bigger top lip than bottom lip, or vice versa. I mean, that's again, we can really, if you really want to get somebody's likeness, you want to make a drawing that looks exactly like somebody, then paying attention to those details is really helpful. Having said that, we are going to kind of look at a few different ways where we can really play with the lips, because we don't have to obey these rules quite so stringently. But if you want to know how to do it so-called properly, then this would be the way. Now, of course, above the lip, you know, if this is the nose up here, we've got this little divot. And similarly, there's, you know, muscle controlling your lips on the top. And then we kind of got this another bit of a, you know, fatty tissue kind of underneath the lips. So let me, and this means that this, you know, we see these kind of like laugh, you know, like when you're laughing, they kind of perk up. So let's, I am going to just shade this. Maybe I will use, do I want to use the, you know, I'm going to use one of these pencils just to kind of show, I'm going to draw some kind of guidelines around here so that we see. So this would be kind of your, I'm going to round these around here so you can kind of just see the shape of the lips. So I'm curving, see all these lines kind of curve around. All right, same sort of thing. I just started here, by the way, because I wanted to kind of get this round shape in. as I come back around this side. Like, you see how they curve outward and then they kind of go straight in the middle and then they curve back this way, so we have kind of these shapes on either side. All right, and as I go towards the middle, they're still curved, but we can't see them. And then same sort of thing. I'm just going to draw this with a slightly different. We have these kind of pockets underneath, right, and then they come out toward, and I'm just going to kind of draw so you can kind of just see the shapes. All right, so here's the chin. And same sort of thing. I'm wondering if I'm just getting a little bit. Well, I'm just keep on going for just a couple seconds. I just sometimes get worried that I might be overcomplicating things for people who are kind of new here, but it might be just helpful for people to see some of this. All right, you see how these, I'm trying to describe the shape of this face, right? And these lines that kind of come out. And then on the, we would have, you know, this other kind of skin kind of coming around. This is a pretty strange drawing. Okay, so if we wanted to kind of then start shading this, let's say I'm gonna, where did I put my pencil sharpener? To use, let's say, this pencil, right? So this area between the lips is the darkest part, right in here. And same sort of thing, this area right underneath here. Well, actually, there might be a little bit of a reflection right under here, so it actually would be more like a little, almost like a little line there that comes up. So often this lip, the top lip, appears kind of almost darker than the bottom lip because it's kind of in shadow, whereas this, we're gonna have some reflections down here. So we have like reflections right on the top, just like in the Rolling Stones image. So I'm gonna shade this. Have these kind of reflections right around the top, and then it gets darker again progressively as we go to the bottom. So you see how just even the way I'm shading right now, I'm just slowly building up. You know, I'm not, you know, I could go a little bit faster than this, but I want you just to see that this is, you know, a process that we, and if we go kind of slow, it's harder to make a sudden mistake. And I also find this can be very meditative, right? You're just kind of, like sometimes you're like, I don't even know if I'm putting pencil lines on here. And if you want, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, this pencil's still sharp over there. You know, and occasionally I'm turning the pencil in my fingers. Okay. The power on that just went out. Okay. How about give me 1 second here to, oh, I'm going to stretch a cable across. With all this new technology, I was trying to think to myself, I wonder if I can get away with the battery being half dead. Can I do another show? The answer is no, clearly. Now, will that come back online? We shall see. 1 second here. Come on. There we go. Okay. Excuse the interruption. Okay. So here I can go darker if I want, certainly, but I think maybe for our purpose right now, that might make enough sense. Okay. So maybe just before I move on to kind of our final drawing and a more realistic one, why don't we just sort of think about different ways that we can draw mouths, right? Well, we just talked about, the smiley face a little bit earlier here. That's emoji, right? So, from there, we have most people when they draw mouths, they just have like a straight line, or they have this kind of line, which work, right? There's nothing, unhappy face, right? Or a little circle, right? I think it's always helpful to add a little bit extra to it, whether you put in some lips. You can draw, I've seen, let's say, lips just kind of like this. I've seen lips, that are like this. I mean, that's kind of a little bit, this is a little more kind of, well, Matisse would do something kind of like, you'd still kind of put his, well, actually, he kind of did a little bit, sometimes some of this kind of stuff. Anyway, you can, I'm trying to think of other artists who really played around with lips, but you can abstract and play with, well, let's just, since I'm talking about all this, let's just do a quick little search here, because me sort of trying to imagine this. Okay. Hopefully, is everything still working away here? I'm just going to close this app. Sometimes I get a little glitch here when a problem happens, so I'm just going to restart. Everything should be fine here. Okay, great. Good. Okay, so let's just look at some images for different ways people draw mouths. Sometimes people are drawing mouths that don't even have the lips, that are just focusing on the teeth, really. We're not going to talk about drawing teeth today, just because they are a little, especially if you're trying to draw something realistic, drawing teeth is a little bit more challenging. So if I'm trying to draw a portrait of somebody and I'm trying to do it quickly, often what I'll say to people is just close your mouth. You can smile, but once you open your mouth and you try to draw the teeth, it adds a little bit of extra complexity to it. Now, if I do kind of a intermediate series of classes, we would talk a little bit more about how to do that, but just think it's worth just checking out all of these different kinds of, like, here's, like, look at these kind of teeth. I mean, so I would say, in a way, drawing mouths is the most forgiving part. Mouths and ears are the two most forgiving parts of the human face when you're trying to draw a portrait, because it's really the eye. If you can nail the shape of the eyes, how big, or not even really the size of the eyes, just kind of the shape of the eyes, and maybe tackle a little bit of the nose and the shape of the face, then you've got it. The lips, you can kind of swap in and out with all sorts of different kinds of things, and it won't have as radical of an impact on whether people get it or not. Okay, so I mean, we could draw some of these. Yeah, let's just do for 5 minutes here. Let's take a tiny detour. That's not cooperating. Well, let's see. Can I blow this up bigger? It doesn't look all that. It's a little pixelated, but I think we'll be able to make it work. So, okay, so let's just do a quick little doodle of some of these, right? So maybe, well, I can fit a few of these on this page here. You know, I think, you know, if you want to draw some of these simple ones, that's relatively straightforward. You want to draw a little bit more complex one, then just start with kind of the basic shape. Right, this one is this one right here. There we go. Right, you know, pretty, just kind of making a bean shape. And then you can either do this to create really quick teeth like that, or let's say we could do the same one again and make it a little bit more complicated by, let's say, adding a quick little lip on the top and the bottom, just a little divot in and divot there. And let's say this will be the middle in between, is we could draw these teeth in individually. And, you know, we could go into the gums and do all that kind of stuff, but for our purpose, you know. So, and then you might want to just darken this in just a little bit, these kind of gaps in between here. And you want to give somebody, you just take out a tooth right there, boom. You've got somebody's just lost a tooth, right? You make something, you take a little chunk out of a tooth, and they've gotten in some sort of argument or boxer fight or something, right? Quickly changes who this character is. Okay, so let's I'm just gonna show. So this is this website that we've looked at before, called Unsplash, and you can just type in any kind of word here. It'll come up with thousands of photographs that are royalty-free, that you can use for fun or for your business. You don't have to credit the photographer when you use the images, but it's encouraged. It's, you know, I should do some research into this website and what their deal is, and but it's a great way for people to build their portfolio and kind of get their work out there. Because sometimes people take tons of photographs, and what am I going to do with them? So maybe instead of just sitting on your hard drive, it would be cool to share them, right? It's part of that kind of wiki mentality of things. But anyway, I just Googled mouths here, and we got plenty of images. Often kind of better images than you can find on Google Images or Yahoo Images or any other kind of thing. So let's find something. could, well, okay, how about we could use this woman's mouth here. Now, just as I'm looking at this image, her mouth is, you know, most of the time when our mouths are kind of in a resting position, they kind of go outward. And if our mouth is in that resting position, it's pretty much the width of the mouth, kind of where the corners of the mouth are, will line up with our pupils, right? So if I just look into the camera there, you should be able to see, you know, if I kind of hold this pencil, right, you see how it kind of matches up pretty closely, you know, with the, where's this way, right? So, you know, if I was to do this both times, I feel pretty silly, but can you see how, versus in this picture, this woman's kind of not quite pursing her lips completely, which makes the mouth much smaller, but just enough to kind of bring her lips in, and it kind of creates more of a, it makes her lips look like they have maybe a little bit more volume than they might ordinarily have. So let's zoom in. Is that as big as I can? Well, let's just drag it to the desktop and then we'll make it nice and big. Okay. So let's get our sketchbook out again here, and in fact, let's just make that even a little bit bigger. I'm going to make a nice big drawing of these lips. I had one of my lips that I was going to use. My wife took some pictures of me the other day that we've used for drawing noses and eyes, but you might notice I have a little bit of a hairy upper lip, so it might make it a little bit difficult for people to see some of those details. So I'm just on the fly here thinking, let's just actually use this resource. Or, as I've said before, use your own mirror if you want to study some lips, so that rather than just drawing some stranger's lips or my lips, you're drawing your own lips, because eventually in a week and a half from now, we're going to be doing self-portraits. So I'll be drawing myself, and I'll encourage you to draw yourself. So the more that you're studying drawing your own self, the easier it's going to be, and the more of a likeness you'll pull off when you draw your face. Anyway, so I'm turning my sketchbook onto its side. And just to begin with, I'm going to use my pink again as my underdrawing. I'm just going to draw a line across here. Maybe I'll make it a little bit darker so people can see. Yours, you'd probably want to make it very light, but I just want to make sure it shows up on everybody's phone, no matter what sort of lighting condition you have here. And I'm just going to divide this in half so we know where the middle point of the lips is. So, like I said before, we have this kind of, I did it before as a V shape, but so, well, let's just kind of keep this V shape here, right? So we can see that very subtle kind of the top lip coming down over here, right? And then we have this kind of, it comes on either side, a kind of a little bit of a semicircle, because we have these pockets of fat on the top of the lip, right? And then we have this U shape. I don't usually draw these, these three shapes here, but just for our learning purposes, I think it's just, you might find it a little bit helpful just to see what I'm doing here. And I often don't even teach that, but I think it's helpful to see. So you notice we have this, and I might have drawn that a little bit wide, but that's okay. And then we've got this comes up, and then it kind of turns back down here. Oops, I'm gonna move this over. All right, so up, down, and around. Okay, and then we come up, You know, so I'm trimming this down a little bit, right? Because she doesn't have huge lips. She's got, and so, you know, you can see I've drawn this as kind of a curve here, but it actually, well, let's just build the basics in here before I start kind of nitpicking and things. I'm just going to draw this basics, and then let's make it more specific to her face. So this, I'm not even looking at the photo on the screen here. I'm just drawing my generic set of lips. Okay, because that can also be really helpful if you just draw the generic thing and then try to kind of use it to get your drawing sorted out. Okay, so now let's look a little bit more carefully. So this area right here is that little divot in the front, and then it more kind of quickly, because she's pursing her lips, kind of comes in to the side and then down. Same sort of thing here. Just going to darken this. I'm going to shade it all as well. So this is the new edges of the lip. All right, and if this is the top, the way that, because she's, normally they would probably, these lines are, you know, I can never remember which is concave and convex, but so because she's pursing her lips, this is kind of pulling in a little bit. So you see how ordinarily it might be coming, it might, not always, but it might be doing that, but when she's pursing her lips, this goes from being this shape to kind of coming outward here. All right, and that also gives us a clue as to not only what she's doing, but maybe even how she's feeling. Right, it helps emphasize these mouths coming in, so maybe she's, you know, rather than just a resting face, she's having more of an expression. Okay. Same sort of thing too. You see how in the original there was when the mouth is at rest, we've got the lips kind of come up here, whereas because she's pursing her lips, it's pushing this part down. So we don't have that same shape anymore. It kind of does this. So now we're much, I'll maybe just move, well, I'll move this photo down so it lines up. There we go. A little bit more with my drawing. Okay. So now the next thing, often, pretty much, well, not often, everybody's lips have these, you know, some might say wrinkles, but it's just where the skin has to go. You know, maybe I'll just kind of zoom back out here. You know, I took some photographs of my own lips, my wife did, and, you know, if I'm smiling, you see the skin. Let's just go look at these photographs. I keep talking about things, and then I'm like, well, I'll just show what I'm talking about here. So let's just look at these photos here. So here's just a straight on of my face in all its late night glory with stubble forming, and so here's basically the same kind of shot, although same expression, but my wife, I think, is a little bit, the camera comes down just a little bit, so I actually see the line, whereas in this photograph, the line kind of appears straight, whereas now, because it's a little bit lower, the sides of my mouth appear to come down. Do you notice that little subtle thing? It's not a big thing, but it is a thing. Okay, and then here's one where I'm smiling. not the most beautiful smile. I think I'm kind of like, take the photo, right? But look how the difference between, like, just look at the so-called wrinkles on my lips here versus when I'm smiling. All of this just becomes super smooth, especially right here, right? It starts smiling, all that skin's got to stretch across. Whereas when we do a kind of kiss, all of that bunches up, right? So, and then let's look at, here's the 3/4 profile from the, looking off to the side. And again, look here. Now we can also really see another thing here. Look how these lips appear to kind of come down at a rest, from the side anyway, come down, versus when I smile, they come back up, right? Which is how we get that smiley face, right? Where that line appears to kind of come up. Even though we don't really, your lips don't like actually form this ridiculous kind of thing, but they sort of actually go more from down to kind of straight, if that makes sense. Same sort of thing here. Look at this line here, resting, right? It's kind of a diagonal kind of, or which way? On this way, it looks like it's kind of something like this, versus smile. Again, not the prettiest smile, right? But so it goes from here to here, right? Here to here. So let's come back to this drawing here. We'll finish. Have I had this whole thing? Oh no, just panicked that I didn't. Did I have my? Were people able to see what I was doing this whole time? Okay. I think so. Okay, so let's go back to this drawing. So now I want to draw some of these so-called wrinkles on here, as your lips have been pursed together. So, and often, you can see how these sort of wrinkles are strongest as they come towards the middle of the mouth, and then they kind of dissipate and disappear almost entirely down here, right? Because so these wrinkles don't continue all the way up and down the face. And I can use these to help, just like I did in my previous drawing, show the contour, the shape of these lips, right? And if I want to get really specific, I can really draw, the way that they kind of come in and where they intersect, just like a fingerprint does, right? But I don't think, I'm certainly at this point not that concerned with that level of detail. So, and I don't think most people would be. But if you're trying to draw, let's say, a so-called photorealistic image, then you'd want to be mindful of not just putting these lines anywhere, but you're looking carefully at where they begin and end. All right, so we got these. I'm just going to kind of lightly illustrate. Let's say, her nose is up here. Fairly small nose. We're not going to draw the nose, so I'm just going to stop there. So, let's see, 5. I'm going to actually use a little bit of the Conte, the charcoal stick. Again, this is how they come, and you can get different sizes. Like here's another one that's like much bigger, right? So, and they come, if you want to get one like this, I think they come in like a box of 2 versus a box of 25. Okay, so I'm going to use this just to do a little bit of shading. And I also just have this like on it looks like a Petri dish, but this is a cover of a plastic lid to an ice cream jar, right? So this kind of keeps everything in here, because you'll often get these little tiny pieces of charcoal, and where do you keep them? And they're actually really useful. So you don't want to throw these away, because I'm going to use some of these as we start shading. Otherwise I would have to break that large piece to get at it. Maybe I'll just keep this here. And this, by the way, $6.50. I think it was a little bit overpriced, so you probably should be able to get this for much less, like $2, $3, $4 or so. I'm going to come back in. I personally really like always emphasizing that line in the middle. And then I'm actually I'm using one of these small pieces I just talked about. And I'm going to, you can see how quickly I can kind of shade this in. And if I was using my 9B pencil, I could also do this. I'm just going to lay in a bit under here. And then I'm just going to try smudging this around a little bit. Like, you see how quickly the difference in the texture between when I first lay that down versus now that I start smudging things around. And I've got a little buildup on my finger, so I can actually take this into this area here and just darken it a bit. So if you're drawing your own lips, you're just paying attention. Do you want to just, if you can get the basic, if you can just draw that shape and that you see when you look in the mirror, that's huge. It's really important to kind of nail that down. And you may feel, oh, it just looks like anybody's lips. But just by studying that detail is really important. Okay, we got underneath here. Some people, you can see her lips create this shadow right there. Some other people have just almost like a little gap where between the skin of the lip and then this gap happens and then it gets dark underneath here. So being mindful of that. Okay, so I just lay some more down here. I'm going to try to finish this up in about 5 minutes. I'm just going to maybe back out here. Oops. Where am I? Just so we see a little bit more of these lips. And again, if I squint my eyes, what is the darkest areas of this drawing? Just got a little divot here. You know, the darkest areas, as I'm going to lay them in, are kind of, I see right here, right here. Okay, maybe I'm going to come back in with my pencil and just show, for those of you who don't have charcoal, kind of how I can, like, I could do all of this with just my pencil, right? I'm just going to come back in and kind of do just that. I actually personally find it easier to use the pencil than the charcoal, although I know there's plenty of people who feel the exact opposite. I just feel I have a little bit more control. Like when I use the charcoal, maybe it's probably because I've rarely used charcoal, so I maybe have less confidence in using that tool than I do with a regular pencil, which I'm using, you know, all the time. And don't be afraid to even try, like, see my fingers are getting darker, right? I got soap right in the sink just over here. If I do get a little messy, I can just go right over there and just clean up afterwards or during at any time. will say sometimes what people will do is they'll be very, they may not put very many, if any, of these kind of little wrinkle lines in there. And everybody's got them. You know, whether you're a 2-month-old baby or a 90-year-old man, right? Like, you are going, it's just, I mean, that skin has got to go somewhere, right? When you're pursing your lips like this, right? And no one has ever said, "Ooh, your lips, you know, I was about to kiss you, and then I realized, look at all those little wrinkles." Or maybe somebody has, but they probably aren't going to get the follow-through of that kiss, right? You know, if I was, let's say, drawing most particularly a woman, right, and I would definitely be go a little bit easy on some of these lines, just because they will tend to kind of age somebody for sure, even if they're there. Again, you know, this has happened to me many times where I've done drawings of people, and I did a whole project where I went up to Dawson City in the Yukon and was trying to draw a portrait of every single person there. And there were some people, like, I did omit some details because I thought, like, I was going to try to be more flattering to them, and they actually got a little bit upset, and they felt like I was changing their face, or, you know, so it's where some other people were like, "This is great, you made me look so youthful," and so you never know, right? Everyone's got, you know, we have, as humans, everybody's got a bit of a hang-up about their face, right? We look at it constantly, and, you know, sometimes it drives us crazy, or we look at it and we see a different face than we think is there. Okay, I'm gonna use the side of my pencil just to darken up here. Again, I'm squinting my eyes looking at this drawing, right? And what is this section needs to get much darker. Obviously, I'm not even going to draw the rest of the face here. Well, I do feel like I need to put a little bit of this here. See, what's so fun about using charcoal like that is I can just, boom, lay in a lot of color, which is also has its danger because you can put in a lot of color really, or tone really quickly, and then you're kind of like, but then of course you can use your white, right? You can come in here and go like, oh, okay, you know what, actually I need to put a little highlight back in here, and I feel like I need to put a little highlight back in there. Oh. It's not very dark, so in there you're not going to see too much of a difference, but certain areas it definitely kind of makes a little bit of a difference, right? Okay. So I think for our purpose, I might call that now, so we don't get more. I feel when I start to get, well, okay, I'm just going to do a little bit more, because what I want to do, I look at that drawing and I think like this needs a little more volume right here. It needs to be darker in here. Okay. I just want to be able to get somewhere that I can live with it. You can see as I'm going back over some of this white, it's actually making it a little bit darker, those highlights. So I got to be a little bit, that's the problem with like using colored pencils. And I think this is like, I don't even remember buying, well, maybe I got so many art supplies, I don't even remember, but sometimes I just like, you know, when I'm at school, I accidentally pick up a student's pencil for a demo, and then I'm using it and drawing with it for the rest of the class, and then I think the kids are too scared to ask for it back afterwards. So sometimes I come home with all these extra pencils, and I'm like, I don't remember, where did I get this? Uh-oh. And then of course I forget to bring it back next week, and I'm sure they talk amongst themselves about, okay, I gotta have to like stop, otherwise I'll just be here all day drawing kind of things. But I think you see the basics of how to draw a mouth, right? I feel pretty happy with these drawings. So what I would encourage you to do over the course of the next, until next Tuesday is, again, looking for some images of lips and mouths online. You could use Unsplash or Google Images to find some, draw from them, go on your friend's Facebook, and look for some images you could just draw. Like, even if you're just drawing somebody's lips, it's a little bit easier, maybe more forgiving, I think, for you to do that, or you can be less hard on yourself if you do that than, let's say you're trying to draw even your own lips, or if you're trying to draw their eyes, right? If you try to draw a friend of yours, your daughter or your mother or granddad's eyes, you'll notice if it doesn't turn out, you can feel like, oh, I didn't get it quite, capture it properly. Whereas if you're drawing their mouth, you're probably not going to have that same kind of feeling of defeat if it doesn't quite look exactly. You may not even notice too much of a difference, even if you're kind of so-called wide off, right? Or wide away from doing it. So you can have a lot more fun doing this. You can really play with different styles. You know, as I was thinking about different, you know, people replace mouths with objects, you know, and turn these, instead of, you know, two lips like this, they turn them into sausages or into rocks, or, you know, I mean, Twizzlers, you know, candies, you know, nuts and bolts and all sorts of different kinds of things. So you don't have to just try to make this look like real, and you can still come away with a face that looks like a face. I don't know, I don't think anybody sent me any images to review this week or give feedback on. If you do, then we'll talk about those on Tuesday, and there's potential we might be out of town next week, so I'll try to do one of these while we're on the road. And what other things I want to say before we go? You know, if you're finding this video, if this is the first time you've seen me, well then welcome, hello, and I hope to see you again next week. If this is the 20th video you've been watching, thank you so much for your persistence and determination to get better and better, and I know you're better than you were before. And it would be meaningful to me if you liked the video, if you hit the subscribe button and the little bell on the bottom so that you know when the new videos are showing up. There's links to my Facebook and Twitter, Instagram, and Twittergram, and you can like those, and often, especially on the Facebook, I kind of post when new videos are coming up, so you can find those. And I'm going to be announcing an acrylic painting class. It'll begin in a couple of weeks, so I'll be kind of mentioning that infrequently through this our drawing series, but if you're interested in finding about that, then you'd want to click the acrylic. Or you'd want to be following some way to find, either subscribing to this channel or through the other ones to know when that's appearing, and for links to the particular kind of paint that I would encourage you to buy, so that when you're mixing the colors I'm using, you're going to get the same results, right? Because every ultramarine blue, you know, whether it's made by Liquitex or who's another company, Golden, right? They're going to have slightly different makeups. So even though they have the same label on them, they're going to look a little bit different. I mean, it's not the end of the world, but it would certainly make your life easier, especially if you're starting out. And then lastly, if you want to make a small contribution to the channel through PayPal, there's a link below where you can send a small donation of $1, $5. I've had a number of people now send $50 and $100, so which is fantastic. That helps make all of this happen. If you go back to the very first episodes 3 months ago, you'll see this whole space looked very different than it does now, and that's all thanks to the people like you who have been contributing to the channel. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. So we will see you on Tuesday. Try to get a little bit of drawing in between now and then. You know, last class I showed a picture that my mother had done because she's following along. Hi, Mom. And clearly has been doing a little bit of extra stuff, drawing some of her grandchildren, right? And that would be a good way to start applying some of these things. Maybe they don't turn out exactly the way you hoped, right? You're not going to wake up one day and be Da Vinci or Frida Kahlo, right? But it's applying these things each time that's going to make you become better. So we'll talk to you on Tuesday. Have a wonderful week, everybody, and great weekend. And we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.